Well, we're going to start at the very beginning because I don't know where everybody is. So some of this may be repeat for you, some of it may be new. We'll just all look at it together. What we're going to talk about today is navigating cells and workbooks, some keyboard shortcuts, and some formula tips. And if we should have a little bit of time at the end, and I'll open up the chat window and we can do some questions and answers and talk about anything you might want to talk about next week when we go into some more advanced ideas. So that in mind, navigating in Excel, you all know you can move your arrow key or you can click your mouse, but there are some keyboard shortcuts that are very helpful when you're trying to navigate around your data inside Excel. To go to the end of a column or the end of a row, you simply hit the end key and then the arrow key in the direction that you're looking for. That will go to the last column that has data unless there is data after that column that's separated by a space. So it'll go to the last continuous data in a column or a row. Anytime you're in the spreadsheet, any place in the spreadsheet, if you hit Control Home, you will go to row 1, column 1, or A1, as most people call it. If you want to select all the data in a worksheet, that's Control Shift End. That will just select the data that is filled in your worksheet. If you want to select the entire sheet, then you hit Control A. To highlight what's copied, Control C. To cut what's highlighted, Control X. And to paste either one of those, Control V. And we're going to stop here for just a second. And I'm going to, for those of you who don't know, Control A, Control C, Control X, Control V, Control F, Control H, and Control P, and Control S. Those commands are as old as the personal computer. They were originally created in the very first word processor called WordStar, and both Microsoft and to some extent iOS have carried them forth in all programs. Now, the difference with the Mac is that control key is now, for some of these, is the command key rather than control. So each one of those, Control A selects everything. That works in Word as well. It works in PowerPoint as well. It works in all the Microsoft suite of programs. Control X to cut. That means it's going to remove what you have highlighted and place it where you paste it. Paste, Control V. Control Find helps you find something. There's some very interesting things you can do with that. Control H finds and replaces. You tell it what to find and what to replace it with. Those are all handy tools, particularly when you're dealing with large spreadsheets and you want to make a correction in everything. Control prints, Control S saves. To open another workbook, that's Control O. To move to the previous sheet or the next sheet rather, that or tab, Worksheet Excel calls the tabs sheets. So each worksheet is a sheet. Most commonly, most of us think of those as tabs because they look like little tabs at the bottom of the screen. So to move to the next sheet, Control Page down. Move to the previous sheet, Control Page up. Now you can do all these things with your mouse, but sometimes it's easier to use a keyboard shortcut. So to select a range beginning with the topmost cell, and this is to select. If we go to the end, that's just end and down arrow. If we press Shift End and down arrow, that will select from the cell that you're on to the very end of that column or that row. If it's the row, it'll be shift and right arrow. If you have more than one Excel workbook open, you can switch between them by hitting Control Tab. The first or last sheet of, let's say you have many tabs or many worksheets, like it's not uncommon to have 16 or 20, or I've seen as many as 100 worksheets in an Excel workbook. Getting from the very first one to the very last one can be a painful process if you just hit Control Page Down. However, you can navigate to the first or last sheet. If you look at the bottom of your Excel tab, and we're going to go to Excel here in just a minute. We're going to get out of PowerPoint because we need to demonstrate some things. But if you look at the bottom, you'll see some arrows where your worksheet tabs are. And if you hit Control and the left arrow, you'll go to the very first worksheet. And if you hit Control and the right arrow, you'll go to the very last sheet. Then I've given you, again, Control Page Down and Page Up to move one sheet at a time. There are other ways to do this. I have written a macro, and several people have written a similar macro, where you can create a menu on your very first sheet with hyperlinks to each one of these tabs, which makes it easy to go to. Excuse me. So entering dates, we're going to demonstrate this, but this is just, and I have sent these to TAR to share with you guys both this PowerPoint demonstration and the Excel workbook that we're going to be working with. Entering dates, there's volatile. When we say volatile, that means it changes. So if you enter using equals today and an open parentheses and close parentheses, it will give you today's date. But if you open the workbook tomorrow, that cell will show tomorrow's date. Likewise, if you equal now, it will give you the current date and time. But every time the sheet is recalculated, let's say you enter some things and you enter some formulas and you recalculate those formulas, that time will update. So that's what we mean by volatile. If you want to enter a time or a date that is not volatile, you can use, you can do this two ways. You can either enter it directly as 01/11/2023. That's the long way. The short way is Control plus the semicolon. That enters the current date as a value in date format. And if you want to enter the current time as a value, you hit Control and the colon key, and that enters the current time. It will not be volatile. It will remain as that number. We're going to go through some data arithmetic. This will be easier to understand when we're on the worksheet. If you want to enter repeating data, we're going to go through that. You have an ordered list like numbers or January through December. Excel has a function that will let you do that, and it will even has a function that lets you develop your own custom lists that will fill, and we'll demonstrate that on the workbook as well. And then we're going to talk a little bit about entering formulas. All formulas begin with either equals or plus. You can write a simple formula using just the mathematical operators that you're familiar with. Plus, minus, asterisk for multiplication, and the slash for division. There's also a character or an operator for patching characters together and creating a text string. That's the ampersand. That can be used. There's also a Excel function called concatenate that will also string words and numbers together to make a string. And when we talk about a string, string is a text character. Text characters you can't add and subtract. You can't do any arithmetic on a string. You can only find characters inside the string, and we'll talk more about that later. Excel has some built-in functions. If you don't want to use plus, you can use the word sum. So equals sum, and then either point to or type in the cells that you want the sum of, or average or count. Mod will give you the modulus arithmetic. A standard deviation will give you the standard deviation. There's a whole list of these, and we'll go over those when we get into the worksheet. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to put this away, and I'm going to stop sharing that, and we're going to share the worksheet. So here we go, and we're going to go getting around and times and dates. So there's all those keyboard shortcuts that we talked about earlier, and there's just a little comment there talking about how these commands, how long they've been around. And now we're going to talk a little bit about dates. Again, we said we could enter, and what I've done here, if you look up at the top, this is the formula bar up here on the top. There is a Excel function called formula text. If you write equals formula text and point back to the cell that has the formula, it will show you what the formula is in that cell. So I'm showing you this is that volatile. Notice that that says 1/11/2023. Well, that's today. When I put that formula in there, it was, I think, 8/1 of 2021 or 2022. But now today it comes up with today's date because it is the today function. And like we said, you can also enter it directly, and you can see up in the formula bar, this says 8/7/2020. Or I can hit Control or semicolon, and this puts in the current date. And notice that it did it automatically. I didn't have to type anything. I didn't have to type the slashes. It's in the date format. And now let's talk about what we mean by date format. So this is exactly how Excel stores the date. And you say, well, that's kind of strange. Yeah, it is. But what that number is the number of days since January 1st of 1900. And that's the way that Excel stores dates. So that means if you do arithmetic, like if you take today minus yesterday, you'll get the number 1. The only problem is with that, I'm going to show you. Well, we're just going to do a little data arithmetic here. Equals this minus this. Okay, it said 887. That's 887 days from 8/7/2020 until 1/1 of 2023, 1/11 of 2023. I happen to format this as, and anytime you want to know the format of a cell, you look right up here in the ribbon, and this is general. What will happen if you don't actually format that cell, if you just leave it as it is in Excel, it will come up as a date. And see that a date, 6/5 of 1902, is 882 days from January 1st, 1900. So if you do arithmetic with dates and you come up with another date, all you have to do is go up here and change it to general format, and you'll get the number of days. Now, when we enter time, time is stored exactly the same way that dates are stored, only now we have fractions. So that fraction indicates the fraction of 24 hours past that initial date. So if I put now, which is 11/11/2023 at 10:14. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to hit F9. That's going to recalculate. And now it says 10:16. See, that's the problem with volatile dates using now and today. So that is this number of days from 1/1 of 1900 plus 0.42802 times 24 hours. So now when you do math with time, you have to keep in mind that you're dealing with fractions of 24 hours. So if you Excel stores like 4 o'clock, and Excel uses two different time formats. It uses the 24-hour format, in which there's no need for AM and PM, or if you type in 4 :00 space PM, Excel knows that you're putting in a time. And so both of those are stored in Excel as 0.67. So 0.67 hours past midnight is 10:46 a.m. Wait a minute, did I do that? Let's see, just a minute. No, 0.67 hours is 24 hours past midnight, or 4 p.m. Excuse me. Okay, so if I enter control plus a colon, which would be control shift, now I get that is the current time, and it will stay that time forevermore. It's non-volatile. That's the difference between this value and this value. All right. So now we did here's some more date arithmetic. If you want to find the days between two dates, you just subtract the larger. You always start with, otherwise you're going to get a negative value. So you always start with the latest date minus the earliest date. So in this case, I have, notice how Excel looks at this, minus C30, or equals C30 minus D30. So this is C30, D30, and that's 4 days. Now let's say I want to calculate the work days. Well, Excel has a function for that. It's called net work days. And that will exclude Saturday and Sunday, or whichever days you consider non-work days. You can customize net work days by a formula. And here, we'll just, anytime you want to understand what a formula is doing, we're just going to click on that and hit the FX, and this will show you start date, end date, and then if you have a list of holidays, it will figure out that those holidays are non-work days too. So like if we went back to, if we put January 1st or January 2nd in this case, January 2nd was the day that we celebrated New Year's as a federal holiday. So if we were to list January 2nd as a holiday, and we had that list in a range someplace in this worksheet, we could highlight that range and say that's our holidays. And then if we were trying to calculate the work days from, let's say 12/22 of last year to today, then it would exclude December 26th and January 2nd as work days. So you have to set that up. So let's say we put holidays in here. I'm just going to put, we're going to call this holidays. and we have 12/26/2022 and 1/2/2023. And what, Martin Luther King Day is next Monday, which is the 17th. That's not correct. Monday was the 9th, 16th. So 1/16/2023. Now, I'm going to do this net work days, and I'm going to add my holidays. Now, it doesn't change this because we've ignored those holidays, but I'm going to go back and change this to 12/22/2022. And we're going to make this, we got to fix this now because I've got a negative number. So I've now made this the largest one and this the smallest one. So between 12/20/22 and 1/3/2023, there were 7 work days. So the math of that, there's more than 7 days between that, but we've now excluded Saturday, Sunday, Monday the 26th, and Monday the 2nd. So now we have, and if we were to just go over here and say equals this minus this, there were actually 12 days, but 5 days of those were non-work days. So this can be helpful for you if you're trying to calculate. I used this when I was working full-time when we were looking at lead times. And lead times were always calculated in terms of work days, not necessarily holidays and weekends. So if we said we could do something in 7 work days, and that order came in on 12/22, we were legally, we were on time with our delivery if we shipped on 1/3/2023. Excel also has a function for the end of the month. So this is EO month, and we'll go up here, EO month C32, which is 1/7 of this year. But now this is, notice it shows it in days. If I change this to date, it tells me that the end of the month is 1/31/2023. Now, this number back here tells you how many months to calculate. If you say 0, that's the current month. If you say 1, it will give you, and we're going to change this. Let's change this to 1, and it should give me February 28th. Okay. Likewise, if you change it to 3 or 2, it will give you March 31st, and so on. There is also an undocumented formula or function in Excel called date diff. And date diff works the same way as this does, only it has several different ways to do it. It says date diff between C33 and D33 in terms of months. It will give you 12. If I did it in terms of days, it would say, and let's just do that. Days, and it doesn't matter whether it's capitalized or uncapitalized. So this says that the number of days between those two dates is 366. But if I wanted to get the number of months between those two days, I do this. And if I wanted to get the number of months between those two dates, and I don't want to think about the year, then that's using the MD function. And that would be, there's only 1 month or 1 year difference between those dates. Not, yeah, okay. Time arithmetic. Remember, we were dealing with fractions of 24 hours. So if 8:54 to 1:43 p.m., oh, that's a.m. Let's change that. All right. And then we're going to say equals this equals this minus this to get the hours between. Well, it's 4. Again, see, this is what happened. That came up with 4:49. Well, that's 4 hours and 49 minutes. And that 4 hours and 49 minutes in fractions is 4.81 hours. So if you're calculating like an hourly wage or an hourly rate, you don't really want 49, you want the fraction. The fraction will, now you can multiply times a rate and get an exact amount. So that is basically this E27, this value times 24. And if you needed to get the seconds, you just have to think about the arithmetic. Well, how many seconds are in an hour? Well, there's 60 times 60, 3,600. So now you have to do the math to do that. So let's go back up here, and sometimes you get dates, particularly from mainframe computers or large database systems that don't look like dates to Excel. So you might get a date that looks like this. And notice this says date, but it really isn't a date. So there's an easy way. If you got a whole column of these, you can just highlight the column, and then you go to data, text to columns, and it's a fixed width, and that width is going to be 10, and next, and it's a date, and wait a minute, let me go back. Let's just do delimited. This is easier. So that delimiter, you push other, is this. And notice what happens down here. When you tell it what the delimiter is, it says, okay, that means every place there's a dash, there's a separation. And now we're going to go next and say, this is really a date. And you finish. It says you already data here. Do you want to replace it? Yep. And now, oh, that's not good. That's because Excel already looked at it as date. Oh, yeah, there's our 8/5/2022. It's separated out. I'm just going to go back up here. This is a little trickier because there are really no separators between 8/05 and 2022. So now here we have to use a date value, and now we're going to, this is a string. This is not numbers, this is a string. So date value, I want at the left, the first character, and slash, and mid. I want to go to the middle of the string, starting with this string, starting at the second value, going 2 characters, that's 05, and our slash, and right I want the last 4 characters, right? Right, that, and I want the last 4. And then I have a parentheses to close. And now it comes up with a date. Notice that that's formatted as a date. And because Excel, now the problem is I don't really want to type that all these places down. So we're going to talk about filling data down. So once I get that formula like this, if I hover right here where the arrow turns or the pointer turns to a black cross and double click, that formula gets filled down as far as there is data to the left of it. So now I have all these dates filled in. And once I do that, let's say I don't need this anymore. What I can do is I can highlight those dates. I hit Shift End and down and hit Control C, copy them. And then I'm going to go. Now, Excel allows you to paste special. So I really don't want to paste these as formulas. I want to paste them as values. Okay, notice they're still dates. And now I can just delete these and my dates are here. Of course, my formula text doesn't mean anything now. So anytime you need to convert something and using a formula to do it, but you don't want to keep the original data, you can convert your formula to the values and then delete your original data. Much easier. Let's talk about filling down. Okay, I'm going to delete these right now. And I'm also going to delete these right now. So let's say I have January, February, March. I can take that same handle and drag it down to, notice over here to the right, you see what month you're at. So now there's January through December. If I kept dragging that down, it would keep repeating January through December as long as I was pulling it down. Okay. So likewise, if I have 1, 2, 3, I can drag this down. Let's just go to 20 down. Okay, so now I have the numbers 1 through 20. Here I have a formula. C2 times 2. So now this is 2, 4, 6. Likewise, I can hover here until my arrow or my cross turns black, double click, and now that will copy that formula down as far as there is data to the left of it. Okay, I'm gonna stop for just a minute, and I'm gonna stop sharing and turn on the chat window and say, yes, you will get a copy of this presentation. So are there any questions to this point? I know I've kind of gone through a lot in a very short time. I've got a couple more things to go over today, but I don't want to confuse anybody. So let's stop right now and see if there's things that we need to answer. And if you have a question, be assured that that's probably in somebody else's mind too. So don't be afraid to ask it. There's no stupid question. There really isn't. The Excel file is available as well. I sent both of them to Tahir this morning. Yeah, I realize this was basic information, stuff that you may have already understood or heard before. Hopefully there was something new in there that would help you to do things a little bit faster. I know some people like to do everything with a mouse, but there are times when the keyboard shortcuts are faster than doing things with a mouse. Particularly like the filling data down or filling a formula down is much faster. You can do it with the keyboard, You can use the fill down command, and it'll ask you how far you want to fill it down. But there's a lot more keystrokes involved with that than simply finding the black cross and double clicking it. Okay. So one of the reasons that I learned about date conversions, in the job that I had before I retired, we used an AS400, a MIDI computer, if you will, and it stored data in a particular dates, just like I showed you, 05, 08, 2020, as one long text string rather than a date format. So all of our accounting that got invoicing or shipping information or whatever that went to the accounting department, those all had to be converted. So I created some macros to do that for them, and that's how I how I wound up using the date conversions. Okay. No other questions? We'll just go back to our Excel file and we'll talk about entering formulas. Now, if you have a range of data that you want to do a lot of different calculations on, it makes a lot of sense to use that as a named range. And Excel has a function. If you highlight this, you look up here in this box up in the left, that's the name box, and it says that's data. If I hit Control G and notice the named ranges here and click data, it goes to that highlighted range. So now I can, rather than highlighting A5 to A22, I can call that just data. So how I created these numbers, except for this one I typed in, was I used this formula, equals random between 20 and 50. And what that gives you is a pseudo-random number. I say it's pseudo because anytime you generate a random number, it's not really random. It's a kind of a computer algorithm. So this generates a pseudo-random number between that lower value and the upper value. So I generated all these numbers. And down here, I said equals sum of data. Well, did the same thing over here, equals sum of data. This is the average of that data. Now, and this is the count of that data. But there's an interesting thing about the count function. It only counts numbers. So if I highlight this, let me go highlight data, and you look down here at the bottom, it says the count is 18, but this says 17. So count function only counts the numbers. If I want to get a count of everything, I have to use count A. Count A counts every cell that has something in it. Now the problem with that is if you've got a formula in that cell that the answer to that formula is blank, it's going to get counted, because even though it's blank, because there's something in that cell. So count all will count every data that has something in it, either a value or a formula. So we're going to talk about these functions here. So if you need a formula, so this right now, this is this function, if I hit this f of x, it's going to show you how this function works. Okay, it says that that's between the bottom and the top. So if you try to enter 50 first and 20 second, it's going to give you a I don't know what you're talking about. Actually, let's try that. Let's just try random between, and we're just going to do this. Random between equals rand between. Notice Excel understands what you're trying to type. And I'm going to say, this is bottom. I'm going to say 50 and 20. Gives you an error because it's always looking for the smaller number to be first. So whenever you use random between, it always starts, well, I've changed that to, yeah. It always is going to use the smaller number first. So if I'm going to do a lot of formulas on that range of data, again, using the named range is a good way to do that. Okay. So again, now we're going to go to a blank cell and we're going to click this insert function. And if I click all, this is just a list of all the functions in Excel. And you're, oh boy, there's lots of them, right? So usually it's easier if I want to say, well, I want some financial functions. Well, financial. Well, there's accrued interest. There's accrued interest monthly. There's an amortization. Let's see what this, that returns the prorated linear depreciation. This is a depreciation formula. Coupon days, all these have to do with bond calculations. So future value, you can also calculate a payment. So this is one I've used a lot before. So let's say I have, after my down payment, I've got $180,000 that I want a mortgage at, what is it right now? About 5.5%. And I want to do that for 30 years. So I can say equals PMT. And the rate, this you have to divide by 12 because you're charged interest every month on a mortgage. And the number of payments is, well, we said 30 years. So that's this times 12. And then my present value is in J1. So my payment would be $1,022.02. And that's without mortgage insurance or property taxes or any other escrows that you would have. That's simply the amortized payment for that loan. And it's shown in red and in parentheses because that's what you're going to owe. So it's a negative, it's a debit from your income. So obviously, if you want to convert that to real dollars, that's that times -1, right? That's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be equals ABS absolute. There's the absolute value of that payment. It's $1,022.02. Okay, so going back to our formulas, we have date and time formulas. There's that date value that I used on the first page. Days 360. Some financial institutions use, rather than 365, they use 12 30-day months, 360 days. There's that end of month calculation, EO month. I'm thinking about ones that you might use. Hour. If you have a date serial, like between, if we do that date arithmetic, rather than times 24, you can calculate the hour, the actual hour. If you want to do minute, you can do that. There's our net work days. There's net work days international. There's that now function that gives you the volatile time and date of right now. Time equals, it was going to give you the volatile time, just not the date, just the time. And time value converts a text string into a real time value. There's today, there's weekday and week num. Let's illustrate, those are useful for you. I'm going to illustrate that for you just a little bit here. We'll come over here and we'll let's start with yesterday or Monday, which was 1/9/2023, and 1/10/2023. And now I can highlight these two, and remember I can fill those down. I got to have two of them. Otherwise, if I drag just 1/9, it's just going to copy 1/9 down. Okay. So now I said equals weekday. Got to spell it right. Weekday. This. Now it's going to say, well, what do you want? Is number 1 Sunday or is number 1 Monday? So I'm just going to say 1 because that's the way most of us think. So that tells me that the weekday is the second day of the week, or Monday. And now I can highlight this. Come on. So now this comes down. Sunday is the 14th. The 15th, or Sunday is the 15th. That's the first day of next week. This other function equals week num. And the first day of this year was on Sunday, correct? So this is now the second week of the year. And this is week number. So if you do things, if you do certain calculations or you track things and you have dates and you want to convert them to week numbers, then you can convert and it'll go from 1 to 52 or 53 depending on when you start. Okay. So again, we can do our multiply, divide, add, subtract just like this. So if you see these things on the internet that show, 8 plus, and then 8 times 3 minus 4, and what's the answer? Well, you know what? If you type that into Excel, you'll always get the right answer because Excel uses those arithmetic function order, which is parentheses, exponentiation, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction in that order. So if I say equals B30 plus A30 divided by A42, it's going to divide A30 by A42. And see the dollar signs? That means every place I copy this, it's going to divide that by A42. That is a fixed location. Anytime we put a dollar sign in a formula for a cell location, that indicates that that's a fixed location. So if I put $A, $42, then every place that I copy that, it's going to come back to that cell to do the division. If I were to put $A42, then it would always use column A in the 42nd row to do that product, no matter how far to the right I copied it. If I put $42, it would always use the column A, and then whatever that cell number was, it would copy that across. So it would change every row, but it would always divide by that first column, A. So let's illustrate that. We're going to copy this down. And anytime you don't understand what a formula is doing exactly, I can go to formulas up here in this and evaluate the formula. And now that shows me what a formula is. And it says, okay, what's evaluate? Well, the first term is 28 and the second term is 38 divided by 340. And if I evaluate again, it's going to say that 38 divided by 340 is 0.11764. And then finally evaluate it. That comes out to what the answer is in this formula. Now, handy thing to know, if your formula keeps giving you an error, you can use this function to find out where the error is, because it will evaluate it until it gets to the error and then show you where that error is. That's very handy if you're trying to write a complex formula particularly. So let's do another one here. And let's say equals B30 plus A30 divided by A30. And then to put the dollar signs in, I can hit the function key, F4. If I hit it once, it puts dollar signs in front of both. That means it's going to be exactly like the formula above it. If I hit it again, it's going to put the dollar sign by the row. And if I hit it again, it's going to put it by the column. So now what this does, I'm going to copy that down. These are now A31 divided by A30. And this is A32 divided by A31. And this is A33 divided by A32. And that's what I did wrong, because I did this. Now, okay. So what in essence I've done here, think about it. Each value in column A divided by itself is 1. So I'm basically just adding 1 to this. If I change this to $31, that's going to add 1 to that one. But now it's going to add A32 divided by A31. Okay, and so on and so forth. So you have to be careful when you put your dollar signs in. This is very useful if you want to always divide. If you always want to divide something in one row by the row above it, then you can use the dollar sign for the row function. If you want to divide something in the column by the value in the column previous to it, you can use the dollar sign for the column. So that's a dollar sign A or dollar sign 32, 41, whatever number you want to use. Okay. So this EO month function down here, that is good to calculate the days to the end of the month. So notice we always go with the largest value first, which is going to be the end of the month. So end of the month of this date minus this date says it's going to be 16 days till the end of the month. Likewise here, from the 10th of September to the end of the month is 20 days. From the 15th of July to the end of the month in 2021 is 16 days, and so forth. Those are all important things. Just right quick, we're going to go, well, I'm going to cancel this. I need to go to a blank cell. blank cell. So we've got date and time. We've got all these math and trig functions. If you're a trigonometry guy, there's all this cosine, arc cosine, tangent, arctangent, the whole thing, sine, cosine, sine, arc, sine. All these values are here. Degrees, exponential, there's all kinds of, and each one of these, if you go to it, it's going to explain what it does. So the arctangent h returns the inverse hyperbolic tangent of a number. Well, if you understand trig, then you know what that means. Also, we have statistical. This is where your average and standard deviation, chi-squared test, binomial tests, confidence intervals, F-test. If you're a statistics guy, there's all kinds of statistics in here. That happens to be my area of expertise. Lookup and reference. The address. This gives you the address of a specific row number, column number. The area choose. Choose is a kind of a lookup thing. We'll go over that in the next week. Let's see, where are we on time? Oh, I'm about out of time. Okay, I'm going to stop at that point, and I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to go back to the screen, open up the chat window, and ask, are there any other questions? How can you get a definition of all those functions without clicking on them? Well, the best way to get a definition of the function, you can look it up, just Google it. Say Google count if, and you'll find either from several other websites or from Microsoft itself, an explanation of that function and how it works. Yeah, let's see. If filling down dates and only fills column 1 through 9 and gives a plus, yeah, then you need to widen the column. That's true. Any other questions? Let me ask you one other question while you're thinking of questions, because we want to keep this at 1 hour. Is there any function or idea that we need to cover in week 2 other than tables and lookups? That's what week 2 is all about, and pivot tables. Is there something else that you would like to see? Because we can always fit in a couple of little things here to fit your needs. So what will be covered in the next class? Tables, pivot tables, lookup functions, VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, choose function, all those functions.